Oh, stop crying, Clara. It is just a rug. Do not be such a drama queen. My sister Sarah sneered, her voice dripping with a casual, practiced cruelty that made my blood run cold in my veins. She did not even bother to look up from her smartphone as she intentionally ground her pointed designer heel into the cream-colored fibers of the $15,000 hand-woven silk carpet. I stood there frozen in the doorway while the smell of cheap synthetic apple juice and burnt microwave popcorn hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. This was my sanctuary, or at least it was supposed to be my masterpiece. The heavy oak doors of the Tribeca loft felt like they were closing in on me. I did not scream. I did not even drop my keys. I just stood there, paralyzed by the sheer scale of the destruction, watching my entire professional life's work being dismantled by the very people who claimed to be my support system. My white velvet sofa, a custom piece I had spent 4 months sourcing from a boutique in Paris just to fit the light profile of this specific room, looked like a literal crime scene. There were dark, sticky streaks of Belgian chocolate smeared across the cushions like war paint, and greasy handprints covered every square inch of the delicate fabric. Right in the center of this chaos sat Sarah. She had her expensive ring light set up on my solid marble coffee table, positioned mere inches away from the shattered remains of a limited edition ceramic lamp that was now scattered across the floor like jagged white confetti. She was live streaming to her thousands of followers, her face illuminated by that artificial blinding glow. I could hear her voice, bright, fake, and sickeningly sweet, echoing off the 20-foot ceilings and reflecting off the floor-to-ceiling glass windows. Real-life mom moment, guys. Sometimes you just have to let the little ones run wild and express their creativity while you enjoy this breathtaking skyline view. Real luxury is about the memories we build, not the expensive things we own. This is what true penthouse life looks like when you are a boss babe and a mother. Her 2 children, my nephew and niece, were using my imported silk throw pillows as stepping stones, jumping from the ruined sofa to a designer armchair as if they were playing a game of hot lava. I watched breathless as my nephew's muddy sneakers landed directly on a velvet cushion that cost more than his mother's monthly mortgage payment in the suburbs. Sarah did not even blink. She was too busy checking her angles and adjusting her hair, too busy playing the wealthy socialite in a home she did not own, destroying property she could never dream of affordably replacing. I did the math instantly in my head. The rug, the sofa, the lamp, the professional deep cleaning fees, and the catastrophic damage to my reputation with the developer who owned this unit. It was easily $60,000, maybe more. Before I tell you how I turned this absolute disaster into a one-way ticket to a holding cell for my own flesh and blood, and trust me, the payoff is colder than a New York winter in January, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Also, drop a comment below and let me know. What is the most entitled thing a family member has ever done to you? I want to hear your stories because I am reading every single one of them. You need to leave right now, I said. My voice was quiet, barely above a whisper, but it cut through the fake cheer of her live stream like a razor blade through silk. Sarah looked up, her expression shifting instantly from influencer sweet to purely annoyed, and she abruptly tapped her screen to end the video. Relax, Clara. It is just a piece of furniture. It is just material things. It wipes off with a bit of soap and water, she said, standing up and brushing cracker crumbs from her yoga pants directly onto the Persian rug I had borrowed from an exclusive gallery uptown. She did not offer to clean it. She did not apologize. She did not even look at the broken lamp. Instead, she looked at me with a mix of pity and irritation, as if I were the one being unreasonable for not wanting chocolate and mud smeared on 5-figure furniture. My name is Clara. I am 23 years old, and I have spent every waking hour of the last 5 years building a reputation as the most meticulous and sought-after home stager in Manhattan. High-end developers hire me to turn empty cold glass shells into multi-million-dollar dreams for the elite. This penthouse was not my home. It was my office, my portfolio, and my greatest professional liability. To my sister, however, it was just a free playground she felt entitled to wreck because she was a mother, and I was not. It is not just a couch, Sarah. It is inventory. It belongs to a luxury developer named Mr. Sterling, and he is coming for a final walkthrough in exactly 48 hours. And that lamp you let the kids smash into pieces was on loan from a private artist's collection. I am legally and financially responsible for every single inch of this place. You always make everything about money and status. She sighed, snatching a half-empty juice box from her youngest child. It must be nice to only have to worry about objects and aesthetics. Try worrying about the physical and emotional well-being of 3 human beings for a single day. Then you might understand what real stress is. That was the cue I had heard 1,000 times before. My mother walked out from the kitchen at that exact moment holding a crystal glass of 1982 vintage red wine. It was a bottle I had specifically placed on the mahogany counter as a display piece for the upcoming gala. A vintage meant to be admired for its history, not consumed on a random Tuesday afternoon. She poured herself another generous glass, completely unbothered by the fact that she was currently drinking $400 worth of fermented history. "Do not start with your sister Clara." My mother said, her voice heavy with that familiar tone of disappointment. Sarah has had a grueling, exhausting week with the children. She just needed a beautiful, quiet place to decompress and breathe for a moment. You have all this space, all this luxury, and you are never even here to enjoy it anyway. It is incredibly selfish of you to hoard all of this for yourself when your own family is struggling just to get by. I looked from my mother to Sarah, and suddenly the entire dynamic of my childhood clicked into a sharp, painful focus. It was not just rudeness. It was a deep psychological pathology. I call it the martyrdom delusion. Sarah genuinely believed that because she had chosen to have children, the world, and specifically my world, owed her a debt that could never be fully repaid. In her twisted mind, her reproductive choices had elevated her to a state of moral saintliness where normal rules of respect, boundaries, and property rights simply did not apply to her. I was not a professional woman who had spent years working 80-hour weeks to reach this level of success. To them, I was just the childless sister, a convenient resource to be harvested whenever they felt a lack in their own lives. She looked at my quiet, disciplined life and did not see the sacrifices I had made. She saw a surplus that she was entitled to seize for herself. She believed her fatigue gave her a moral pass to destroy my peace and my career. It is a toxic societal lie that says the person with the stroller always has the right of way, even when they are driving that stroller straight through your professional reputation. "I am working, Mom," I said, my voice trembling as I tried to maintain some semblance of control. "This is a job site. It is not a daycare, and it is not a vacation rental. You cannot just bring people here to destroy property that does not belong to us. See?" Sarah gestured at me with a hand that was still sticky from the juice box. She just does not get it. She thinks a job is stressful because she has to move some pillows around. Try raising the next generation of this family, Clara. Then you can come talk to me about what hard work actually looks like. You owe me this space. You owe me a break from my life because yours is so easy. They did not see me as a person. They only saw what they could take from me, whether it was my time, my money, or my professional standing. I realized in that moment that explaining the actual dollar cost of the sofa would never matter to them. You cannot use logic or financial facts to fight an entitlement that runs as deep as their marrow. I watched Sarah kick a sharp, dangerous piece of the broken ceramic lamp under the edge of the silk rug so she would not have to bend over and pick it up. I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest, a sudden clarity that I had never experienced before. I stopped arguing. I stopped trying to make them understand the gravity of the situation. I just nodded, slowly pulled out my phone, and pretended to check a fake text from a client. "Fine." I lied, my voice becoming flat and emotionless. "I have to go deal with a situation at another property. Just try to be careful while I'm gone. I will be in and out over the next few days." They took my sudden silence for submission, thinking they had won yet another battle in the long war of our family history. They saw it as a victory for the exhausted, deserving mother over the cold, selfish, professional sister. They had no idea that I was already calculating the exact moment to involve the authorities. I walked toward the digital security panel by the front door, my fingers steady as I began the process of secretly reconfiguring the entire access system for the penthouse. I could hear them laughing in the other room, the sound of more glass breaking, echoing through the hallway, but I did not turn back. I knew that the next time they tried to use their influence here, the cost would be far higher than a ruined rug. I navigated through the administrator settings on the wall-mounted tablet, my eyes focused on the guest access logs. I saw the entry codes I had previously given to my mother out of a misplaced sense of daughterly duty. With a few quick taps, I flagged her biometric data for a secondary verification requirement, a hurdle they would not notice until it was far too late to turn back. Sarah was already back on her phone, likely planning her next live stream or inviting more of her influencer friends over to my staged set. I could hear her telling the kids to go ahead and play in the master suite, the one with the white fur rugs and the $5,000 duvet. Every word she spoke was another nail in the coffin of our relationship, and I was perfectly fine with that. My mind was already 3 steps ahead, imagining the look on her face when the reality of the law finally caught up with her fantasies of grandeur. I walked out of the loft and heard the heavy doors click shut behind me. The sound of the electronic lock engaging felt like the first step toward a freedom I had not known I needed. I stood in the carpeted hallway for a moment, breathing in the filtered, expensive air of the building, and felt the weight of my sister's expectations finally starting to slide off my shoulders. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone to call the building's head of security, but then I hesitated. No. I thought I need to let them get comfortable first. I need them to feel like they truly own the place before I show them exactly how much they do not. I began walking toward the elevator, my mind spinning with the details of the Milan trap I was about to set. The elevator arrived with a soft chime, the brushed gold doors sliding open to reveal a mirrored interior that showed me a version of myself I barely recognized, someone who was done being the family doormat. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the lobby, watching as the floor numbers began to descend. By the time I reached the ground floor, the plan was fully formed. I would give them exactly what they wanted, an empty, unsupervised luxury playground, and then I would watch as they used it to bury themselves under the weight of their own greed. I walked past the doorman with a polite nod, my heels clicking sharply against the marble floor of the lobby, sounding like a countdown. As I stepped out onto the busy streets of New York City, the noise of the traffic and the energy of the crowds felt like a welcome distraction from the betrayal I had just witnessed. I knew the next 48 hours would be some of the most difficult of my life, but I also knew they would be the last ones where Sarah had any power over me. I reached my car, climbed inside, and sat in the silence for a long minute, staring at the penthouse windows high above. I could see the glow of the lights through the glass, a sign that the party was only just beginning up there. I started the engine and pulled away from the curb, my eyes fixed on the road ahead, ready to let the ghost protocol begin. I spent that first night in a small, sterile hotel room just 3 miles away from the chaos of the penthouse, my laptop screen glowing in the dark like a beacon of cold, hard justice. I sat there for hours watching the digital blueprints of the building's security system. I officially revoked every single digital key code associated with my mother's name and deactivated the biometric override she thought she had mastered. I felt a fleeting, sharp sense of security as I watched the status bars on my screen turn from a welcoming green to a defiant blood red, effectively turning my high-tech fortress into a tomb for their entitlement. I truly believed in those quiet hours of the morning that technology could do what my voice never could, enforce a boundary that was non-negotiable. I thought that by simply deleting their access, I was deleting their ability to hurt my career. I was naive. I had forgotten that for people like Sarah and my mother, a locked door is not a stop sign. It is a personal insult, a challenge that they are determined to bypass by any means necessary. By 6 o'clock in the morning, the psychological warfare began in earnest. My phone started buzzing incessantly against the nightstand, vibrating with a frantic energy that made my skin crawl. It was a barrage of text messages from my mother, a digital onslaught that read like a script for a bad soap opera. She was calling me heartless, a cold, materialistic daughter who had forgotten the ancient meaning of family loyalty. She accused me of being obsessed with status and dead objects, while my sister was supposedly drowning in the harsh, unglamorous realities of motherhood. Every buzz of the phone felt like a tiny electric shock to my conscience, designed to make me feel small, selfish, and cruel. I stared at the ceiling of the hotel room, listening to the muffled sounds of the city waking up outside, and I realized that they were not just asking for a place to stay, they were demanding that I surrender my reality to theirs. Then came the call that changed everything. My mother's voice on the other end of the line was thin, breathless, and terrified, the perfect Oscar-worthy performance of maternal fragility. "Clara, honey, please answer me." She gasped her breath, catching in a way that sounded dangerously real. "I think I left my vital blood pressure medication in your kitchen cabinet near the espresso machine. The pharmacy is already closed for the holiday weekend, and I am feeling this strange, terrifying tightness in my chest. It feels like an elephant is sitting on my heart. Please, Clara, do not be petty now. Do not make me drive to the emergency room and wait for 10 hours in a plastic chair in this state. Just let me in for 5 minutes to grab my pills. I just need to breathe again." I sat on the edge of the bed, my heart racing. My logical brain, the one that had built a business from nothing, reminded me that I had personally wiped down every single inch of those white marble counters before the staging began. I knew for a fact there were no orange pill bottles left behind, but the "what if" is a powerful, jagged weapon in the hands of a professional manipulator. What if I was wrong? What if she had tucked them into a drawer when I was not looking? What if she actually collapsed on the sidewalk because I was trying to be tough? The guilt, heavy and suffocating, won over my common sense. I caved. With a trembling hand, I opened the security app and generated a temporary one-time use guest code. I texted it to her with a strict warning. "This code is valid for exactly 20 minutes, Mom. Get your medicine and leave. Do not bring Sarah. Do not stay." It took exactly 45 minutes for the betrayal to hit me with the force of a high-speed train. I was sitting in a coffee shop across town trying to focus on a new floor plan when my phone pinged with a notification that made my stomach turn to ice. Sarah had posted a new Instagram reel. The title, written in a bubbly gold font, read, "Big things coming, setting up the new global headquarters for Sarah's Styles." My hands shook as I tapped the video. My sister was spinning in my $5,000 ergonomic leather office chair, holding a crystal glass filled with that vintage 1982 red wine, like she had just won a Pulitzer Prize. She was laughing, her head thrown back as she toasted the camera. In the background, the scene was even worse than I could have imagined. I saw a dozen strangers, mostly young women, in loud, fast fashion outfits, rummaging through my carefully curated furniture displays. They were tossing cheap polyester clothes over the custom white velvet sofa as if it were a bargain bin at a thrift store. I could see the hangers clicking against the delicate wood finishes, and someone had set a dripping iced coffee directly onto the petrified wood side table without a coaster. My mother was there too, visible in the corner of the frame, fluffing the silk pillows on the sofa they had already ruined once before. She was smiling, acting like the proud, gracious manager of this stolen empire. There was no mention of heart medication. There was no emergency. My mother had played the Trojan horse, weaponizing her own health just to sneak Sarah and her influencer friends back into the fortress I had tried so hard to protect. They were not just occupying the space anymore. They were using it to legitimize a business that was built on a foundation of lies. Sarah was telling her followers that she had finally made it in the cutthroat world of New York fashion, and that this multi-million-dollar Tribeca loft was the official headquarters of her brand. She was literally wearing a silk robe she had taken from my private closet, drinking my client's private reserve inventory, and inviting complete strangers to sit on furniture that was currently under a strict legal liability contract. I felt a hot, sharp flash of rage, the kind that makes your vision blur at the edges. But I did not call them to scream. I did not rush over there in a taxi to kick them out in front of their guests. That is exactly what the old version of me would have done, fought a loud, messy, emotional war that only would have ended with them calling me the crazy, unstable, childless one to the rest of the family. This time, I was done playing by their rules. I realized that Sarah and my mother were not just disrespecting me. They were colluding against me with a level of calculated deception that required a much more sophisticated response. If they wanted the lifestyle of the rich and famous so badly, I was going to give them enough rope to hang themselves with. I opened my laptop and began drafting a text message, my fingers moving with a cold, predatory precision. I made sure to hit every single greed receptor in Sarah's brain using the exact kind of language that would make her feel like she had finally won the lottery. "Hey guys," I wrote, my heart drumming a steady rhythm against my ribs. "I am so sorry for the drama earlier. I have actually just been called away to Milan for a last-minute emergency design consultation for a high-end fashion house. It is a huge once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I could not say no. I will be out of the country and completely off the grid for at least 14 days. The penthouse is going to be totally empty, so please, I am begging you, just stay away while I am gone. I do not want the professional deep cleaners to get confused or report any unauthorized activity to the building manager. Enjoy your week. I will talk to you when I am back in the States." I hit the send button and leaned back in my chair, watching the delivered icon appear. I knew my sister better than she knew herself. Telling Sarah to stay away from an empty, unsupervised luxury apartment was like telling a starving moth to stay away from a bright, burning flame. It was the perfect bait, a glittering trap wrapped in a request for privacy that I knew she would find impossible to honor. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head from across the city. To her, this was not a warning. It was a 14-day pass to live out her wildest, most expensive fantasies without me there to witness the destruction. I immediately pulled up the security feed on my phone and watched as the text arrived on Sarah's device. She stopped her live stream for a second, read the message, and a slow, triumphant smirk spread across her face. She showed the phone to our mother, and they shared a look of pure, unadulterated victory. They thought they had broken me. They thought I had finally surrendered, fleeing the country because I could no longer handle the pressure of their entitlement. They had no idea that I was currently sitting in a nondescript cafe 3 blocks away, watching their every move in high definition. I began the ghost protocol by making a series of phone calls that had nothing to do with family. I called the developer's insurance agent and requested a full documented inventory of every item currently in the loft, citing potential security concerns. Then I contacted a private investigation firm that specialized in asset protection and high-end real estate. I wanted a paper trail that was a mile long. I wanted every wine cork popped, every stain made, and every guest who walked through those doors to be documented. I was no longer a sister trying to protect her feelings. I was a business owner protecting her life's work. As the sun began to set over the Manhattan skyline, casting long golden shadows across the streets, I watched on my screen as Sarah began to invite even more people over. She was on the phone, her voice animated, telling people to come over for a massive celebration. I watched as she pulled more bottles of wine from the fridge and started rearranging the furniture to create a dance floor, dragging the heavy, hand-carved mahogany legs across the delicate hardwood floors with a screech that I could almost hear through the screen. My mother was right there beside her, helping her move a marble pedestal that held a bronze sculpture worth more than Sarah's car. They were treating a multi-million-dollar professional showroom like a cheap frat house, and for the first time in my life, I did not feel the urge to stop them. The cost was mounting by the second. I opened a spreadsheet on my laptop and titled it Legal Damages. I started a list: one bottle of vintage wine, $400. Unauthorized use of commercial space, $5,000 per day. Potential damage to hardwood floors, $10,000. I was building a case brick by brick, and Sarah was providing all the labor for free. She thought she was hosting the party of the century, but in reality, she was just documenting her own downfall for the authorities. Every time she laughed for her followers, every time she toasted her success in my robe, she was adding another zero to the check she would eventually have to pay. I sat there in the fading light, the glow of my laptop reflecting in my eyes, and I felt a strange, cold peace. The Milan bait had been taken and the trap was officially set. I watched as a delivery driver arrived at the Penthouse with 3 large bags of greasy takeout, which the kids immediately began eating on the white silk rug. I watched as Sarah's friends started arriving, some of them carrying their own cameras and ring lights ready to feast on the luxury I had built. They looked like vultures descending on a carcass, but they didn't realize the carcass was wired with explosives. I knew that the next 48 hours would be the most expensive of Sarah's life, and I was going to make sure she didn't miss a single moment of the fallout. I closed my laptop with a definitive click and walked out of the coffee shop, the cool evening air of New York City hitting my face like a fresh start. The game had officially moved into the next phase, and I was the only one who knew the score. I sat in the flickering cold blue glow of my laptop screen in a cramped budget hotel room just 3 miles away from the life I had worked so hard to build. The air in the room was stale and heavy smelling of old, dusty carpet and that faint artificial lemon cleaner that never quite masks the scent of neglect. It was a jarring, painful contrast to the scent of expensive eucalyptus, fresh-cut lilies, and filtered air that usually filled the corridors of the Tribeca loft. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life through a 12-inch monitor. It took less than 6 hours for the bait I had set to be taken, and when it happened, it felt like a physical weight settling on my chest. At exactly 7 o'clock on Friday night, the notifications on my security feed started blowing up like a digital firestorm. Motion detected in the foyer, motion detected in the living room, motion detected in the master suite. My heart hammered against my ribs as I watched the grainy night vision feed transition into full color. Sarah did not just come over to water the non-existent plants or check the mail like a normal person might. She arrived with a full-scale catering crew and an entourage of people who looked like they had been plucked straight from a low-budget fast fashion advertisement. Through the high-definition lens of the foyer camera, I watched her usher in a stream of women in glittering cheap cocktail dresses and men carrying heavy black bags of DJ equipment. She was not even trying to hide her tracks anymore. She was wearing one of my private silk robes, a hand-painted piece I had bought at a boutique in Soho for $800, but she had styled it haphazardly as a wrap dress, cinched tight with a belt that did not match. She was shouting orders at our mother, who was busy arranging a massive charcuterie board on a coffee table made of petrified wood, a piece that cost more than my mother's entire car. Make sure the lighting hits the skyline perfectly. Mom, I need the Empire State Building to be visible in the background when I do the live toast for the brand launch. Sarah yelled, her voice echoing through the speakers of my laptop with a piercing, artificial cheer. This was no longer a secret getaway or a place for her to decompress. It was a full-scale housewarming party for a life she had stolen from me. I switched the camera view to the kitchen, where the situation turned from annoying to absolutely catastrophic. Sarah was pulling bottles from the climate-controlled wine fridge, the developer's private reserve. These were vintage Bordeaux bottles aged for decades and meant for display, only part of the high-end experience for potential billionaire buyers who appreciate the history behind the glass. She was popping corks with a reckless, terrifying carelessness that made my stomach turn, pouring $500 wine into red plastic cups she had brought with her in a crumpled grocery bag. "Drink up, guys." She screamed over the thumping, aggressive bass of a DJ who was currently setting up his massive speakers directly onto the delicate, hand-finished hardwood floors without a single inch of protective padding. It is all on the house. My house, I watched, feeling cold and completely detached as she spun a web of intricate, disgusting lies to her guests. I heard her tell a woman with neon pink hair that she had purchased the loft with her earnings from a series of high-level international brand partnerships and brilliant crypto investments. She walked them through the rooms I had spent weeks curating, pointing out the art and the furniture, as if she had personally discovered the artists in the back streets of Paris. She was literally stealing my professional identity in real time, wearing my clothes, drinking my inventory, and basking in the unearned envy of complete strangers. It is hard work, she told a guy who was leaning his entire body weight against a delicate marble plinth that was never meant to hold more than a small vase. People think being a CEO and a mother of 3 is all glamour and easy views. But I built this empire from the ground up while raising my kids in the trenches. I deserve this view. I deserve this life because I sacrificed so much for my family. My mother stood right next to her, nodding like a mindless bobblehead, validating every single lie that came out of Sarah's mouth. She was not stopping the destruction. She was actively fueling it. She was refilling glasses and acting the part of the proud, regal matriarch of this stolen kingdom. Sarah has always had such a natural, effortless eye for luxury and design, my mother told a guest as she sipped on a glass of wine that cost more than her monthly grocery budget. This place is just so... do you not think it reflects her soul? I felt a flash of rage, hot and sharp like a needle under my skin, but I forced myself to breathe through it. Rage was an emotion, and emotions were messy and unproductive. I needed to stay in the realm of mathematics and cold, hard facts. I opened a spreadsheet on the side of my screen and titled it, Evidence Log for Felony Mischief. I started logging the damages with a steady robotic hand, my eyes never leaving the screen. 6 bottles of vintage Bordeaux, $3,200. 1 stolen and ruined silk robe, $800. Unauthorized professional event hosting fee based on market rates, $10,000. Then I saw the first major physical break. One of the guests, a man who was clearly stumbling drunk and laughing too loud, tripped over the edge of the silk rug. He reached out and grabbed the curtains to steady himself custom linen drapes that had been hand-dyed in France and shipped to New York in a temperature-controlled crate. The fabric ripped with a sickening heavy sound that I could almost hear through the mute screen as the entire rod was torn from the ceiling. He fell hard, taking a side table and a ceramic lamp with him. The lamp shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. The heavy table gouged a deep white scar into the dark hardwood floor. Sarah did not stop the party. She did not even help the man up. She just laughed, pulled out her own phone and panned the camera away from the wreckage to focus on the skyline. "Party foul," she shrieked, giggling into her microphone for her followers to hear. I typed into the spreadsheet with a grim satisfaction. Custom drapes, $8,000. Ceramic lamp, $2,400. Hardwood floor repair, estimated at $5,000. The total was climbing fast, surging toward the threshold I needed. $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. I needed it to hit $50,000 exactly. In the state of New York, $50,000 was the legal threshold for a Class D felony for criminal mischief. I was no longer just watching a party. I was building a case file that would ensure Sarah could never walk away from this with just a slap on the wrist or a simple apology. I sat back, took a sip of lukewarm hotel coffee that tasted like burnt beans, and waited for the next disaster. They did not disappoint. At 10 o'clock at night, Sarah decided the living room furniture needed to be rearranged to create a larger dance floor for her followers to see her dance. I watched as she and 2 other men dragged the heavy velvet Fendi sofas across the floor without lifting them. The metal legs screeched across the finish, leaving deep permanent white gouges in the dark wood that would require the entire floor to be sanded and refinished. Then they pushed the dining table against the far wall with a violent shove, knocking over a pedestal that held a heavy bronze abstract sculpture. The sculpture hit the floor with a bone-jarring thud that seemed to vibrate the camera lens. It was a one-of-a-kind piece titled The Weight of Silence, valued at $18,500. I watched as the bronze arm of the figure snapped off upon impact, rolling across the floor like a severed limb. Bingo. We were officially over the line. I closed the spreadsheet and felt a strange, terrifying sense of calm wash over me. I did not call my mother to plead with her. I did not text Sarah to warn her that her life was about to change forever. I picked up my phone and dialed the direct 24-hour line for Titanium Shield, the private security firm contracted by the developer to protect the property. "This is Clara, the lead stager, an authorized agent for the Sterling Penthouse." I said, my voice as cold and sharp as a winter morning. "I am currently viewing a massive, unauthorized commercial break-in on my live security feed. There are approximately 25 intruders currently destroying the property, and theft of high-value assets is in progress as we speak. Send a full response team immediately." I did not call the local police precinct because I knew how that would go. The police often treat family disputes as domestic noise complaints or civil misunderstandings. They knock, they give a polite warning, and they leave. I called Titanium Shield because they were asset protection specialists who did not care about family trees. These men were paid to treat any unauthorized entry into a $10 million property not as a family squabble, but as a hostile threat to a multi-million-dollar investment. I watched the feed with bated breath, my eyes fixed on the elevator doors. 4 minutes after I hung up the phone, the elevator doors in the penthouse slid open with a quiet, ominous hiss. They did not knock and they did not ask for permission. They swarmed, 6 men in full tactical gear wearing heavy vests that said security in bold white letters stormed the foyer. They moved with a military precision that silenced the room in seconds. One of the guards reached over and killed the power to the DJ's equipment with a single flick of a switch, plunging the entire party into a sudden terrifying silence that was broken only by the sound of heavy breathing. "Everyone down hands where we can see them." The lead officer barked, his voice booming through the high ceilings. The party collapsed into absolute, unadulterated chaos in an instant. Ring lights were knocked over, and dropped red plastic cups spilled dark wine across the white limestone tiles like blood, and guests began screaming and scrambling for their coats and bags. I ignored the guests and the panic. I kept my eyes fixed solely on Sarah. She did not panic at first, which was the most telling part. She stood on the ruined sofa, her arms crossed over her chest, looking genuinely offended that anyone would dare interrupt her. "Excuse me," she shrieked at the lead officer, her voice cracking with a high-pitched indignation. "You are interrupting a private, high-profile event. Get out of my house right now, or I will have your entire company fired by morning." The officer did not move an inch. He stepped forward, scanning the absolute wreckage of the room with a professional, grim expression that promised no mercy. "Ma'am, we received a high-priority report of a commercial break-in and felony property destruction. Who is the legal leaseholder of this unit?" Sarah did not even hesitate to double down on her fantasy. She snapped her fingers and pointed to herself with a flourish of her silk-clad arm. I own this entire floor. These are my invited guests, and you are currently trespassing on private property during a private celebration." The officer paused for a moment, looking at her with a calculating gaze. To an outsider who did not know better, she looked the part, rich, angry, and incredibly confident in her own lie. He looked at the framed photos of her children that she had placed over my staged art on the mantel to make the place look lived in. For a second, it looked like he might actually believe her. We have a direct report from the property management office stating this unit is currently listed as an unoccupied showroom and is under a strict commercial staging contract. The officer said, his voice dropping an octave into a tone of deep suspicion. They are obviously mistaken, or the records are outdated, Sarah said sharply, stepping over a pile of shattered glass with a huff. My sister Clara handled all the boring paperwork for the purchase last month. It is a family asset held in a private trust. This is just a housewarming party to celebrate the move. The officer looked at the photos of the kids again, then at my mother, who was nodding frantically and clutching her wine glass behind Sarah's shoulder. The tension in the room seemed to ease for a split second as the guards lowered their heavy flashlights. If this is truly a family dispute over a legal residence, the lead officer sighed, then this might be a civil matter rather than a criminal one. Sarah smirked, a look of pure, ugly, and unchecked triumph crossing her face as she looked at her friends. She thought she had won. She thought her lies had saved her from reality one more time, just like they always had in the past. I watched her through the screen, took a deep, steadying breath, and stood up from the hard hotel bed. I felt the weight of my keys in my hand and the heat of my own resolve. "Wait for me, Sarah," I whispered to the empty, dark hotel room. "I am coming to finish this, and I am bringing the truth with me." I walked out of the room and headed for the elevator, knowing that by the time I arrived at the penthouse, the fantasy would be over and the real world would be waiting to collect its debt. I could feel the adrenaline surging through me, a cold and focused energy that replaced the fear I had lived with for years. Sarah had spent her life building a house of cards, and I was about to blow the whole thing down with a single piece of paper. As I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the lobby, I realized that the hardest part was already over. I had stopped being the victim, and I had started being the architect of my own justice. The doors closed and the descent began. The elevator doors slid open with a heavy, ominous hiss that seemed to echo through the entire floor, and I was immediately met with a wall of sound and the suffocating smell of stale champagne and cheap perfume. The penthouse, which just days ago had been a pristine sanctuary of high-end design, now looked like the aftermath of a riot. I stepped out onto the marble floor, my heels clicking sharply against the stone, and for a moment the world seemed to slow down. I did not rush. I did not shout. I walked with a slow, deliberate pace that felt like a funeral march for my relationship with my family. The air was thick with the scent of spilled red wine and the sharp metallic tang of ozone from the DJ's equipment that had just been forcibly shut down. Sarah was standing in the dead center of the living room, still perched on the ruined velvet sofa, as if she were a queen presiding over a kingdom of wreckage. When our eyes met, she did not look guilty. She did not look ashamed. Instead, she tilted her head back and let out a sharp, jagged laugh that felt like a slap to my face. Look who finally decided to show up to her own party. She sneered, her voice thick with a fake bravado that was clearly starting to crack at the edges under the stern gaze of the security team. My sister, the ghost, finally decides to haunt us with her presence. I ignored her completely. I did not look at the deep purple wine stains that had already soaked into the $15,000 silk rug. I did not look at the shattered pieces of the $18,000 bronze sculpture that lay scattered by the floor-to-ceiling windows like discarded trash. I walked straight past the trembling guests, most of whom were hiding their faces from the cameras, and stood directly next to the lead security officer from Titanium Shield. Beside me stood Mr. Sterling, the lead developer and the man who held my entire career in his hands. His face was a deep mottled red of pure, unadulterated fury, and I could feel the heat of his anger radiating off him like a furnace. She claims she is the legal leaseholder and the primary resident of this unit, the lead officer said, gesturing towards Sarah with a gloved hand. She claims this is a private family residence and that you are simply a relative who handles the administrative paperwork and the staging for her personal brand. Sarah stepped off the couch, then smoothing out the stolen $800 silk robe she was wearing as if it were a royal garment. "That is exactly right," she said, her voice regaining its steady manipulative edge as she addressed the officers. "Clara is just my younger sister. She helps me with the boring stuff, the contracts and the decorating, because I am far too busy raising the next generation and running a global fashion empire. This is all just a massive, embarrassing misunderstanding." She looked at the officer with a practiced, wide-eyed innocence that she had used to get her way since we were children. Then she turned her gaze to me, her eyes hardening into cold flints of warning. "Clara, tell them. Tell them this is our place. Tell them you invited us here. Do not be petty and ruin this night just because you were not invited to the VIP hour of the launch. You know how important this is for the family." I did not say a word to her. I did not give her the satisfaction of an emotional outburst. Instead, I reached into my professional leather briefcase and pulled out a heavy transparent folder containing the original notarized vendor agreement and the commercial liability insurance papers. I handed the documents directly to the lead officer, my hand perfectly steady. "This is a commercial staging contract," I said, my voice sounding incredibly calm and cold, even to my own ears. "I am the lead design consultant and the sole authorized agent for Sterling Luxury Developments. This unit is a registered commercial showroom, not a residence. It is currently under a strict legal liability period for staging and marketing purposes. There is no residential lease. There is no residential title. And this woman, my sister, has absolutely no legal right to be inside this building, let alone hosting a commercial event and charging people for entry." The room seemed to grow 10 degrees colder in a single second. The silence was so heavy, it felt physical. The lead officer reviewed the documents, his eyes scanning the official seals, and the signature of Mr. Sterling, who was standing right there as a living witness. Mr. Sterling stepped forward, then his voice a low, dangerous rumble that made several guests at the back of the room start heading for the door. "I am the owner of this property," he said, looking directly at Sarah as if she were a common thief. "I have never seen this woman before in my life. She has no authorization to be here. She has no key to this unit. And she certainly has no authorization to destroy $82,000 worth of curated inventory. I am pressing full criminal charges for felony mischief, grand larceny of professional services, and commercial trespassing. I want everyone who is not authorized to be here identified and removed immediately." Sarah went pale, a sickly greenish-white color that made her look small and fragile for the first time in my life. The influencer mask had finally slipped, revealing the terrified, entitled girl underneath. She looked at our mother, who was currently trying to hide her wine glass behind a decorative marble urn in the corner of the room. "Mom, do something!" Sarah shrieked, her voice rising to a panicked, high-pitched wail that echoed off the glass walls. Tell them it is Clara's fault. She gave us the access codes. She told us we could stay here while she was in Milan. She is lying to get me in trouble because she has always been jealous of my life." My mother stepped forward, then her hands shaking so hard that the crystal glass clinked violently against the marble urn. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a forced, desperate sweetness that I had grown to loathe. "Clara, honey, please," she began, her voice cracking. "You cannot do this to your sister. Think of the children. Think of what a felony record will do to her future and to our family name. It was just a little bit of fun, a chance for her to feel special for once. We can fix the floors. We can buy a new lamp. Do not be so heartless and cold over mere material things. You have so much, and she has so little." The lead officer did not wait for another word. He unclipped the heavy steel handcuffs from his tactical belt with a definitive metallic click that sounded like a hammer hitting a nail. "Ma'am, turn around and put your hands behind your back right now," he commanded Sarah. Sarah began to scream a loud, piercing sound of pure, entitled rage that I will never forget. She kicked at the air. She pleaded with the guests to film the police. She called me every foul and hateful name in the book, but it did not matter. The law does not care about family hierarchies. The law does not care about the martyrdom of motherhood or the perceived slights of a sibling. It cares about deeds. It cares about titles. And it cares about the destruction of nearly $100,000 in property. As they led her toward the elevator, her heels dragging against the ruined hardwood, she twisted her head back to look at me. Her face was contorted with a hatred that was finally blissfully out in the open. "I hate you." She screamed, the veins in her neck bulging. "You have always been a cold, lonely robot. You have nothing but your expensive furniture and your empty rooms. You will die alone in a beautiful house and nobody will care." I watched the elevator doors close on her screams, and for the first time in a decade, I felt like I could actually breathe. I did not feel a rush of joy, and I did not feel like a hero in a movie. I just felt a profound, weightless sense of relief, as if a heavy, invisible chain that had been wrapped around my neck since childhood had finally been cut. My mother stood in the center of the ruined room, looking around at the shattered glass and the wine-stained silk, her bottom lip trembling with a mix of fear and indignation. "What have you done, Clara?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "You have destroyed this family for a few pieces of wood and fabric. You have put your own sister in jail. How can you live with yourself?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and I realized that she was never going to see the truth. She was always going to be the enabler for the person who screamed the loudest. "I did not destroy this family, Mom," I said quietly, my voice steady and firm. "I just stopped paying for the lies that were holding it together. Sarah destroyed herself the moment she decided my life was her plaything. I am calling a car for you now. You need to leave this property immediately, or Mr. Sterling will have you escorted out in handcuffs as well." As the security team cleared out the remaining guests and the professional cleaning crew arrived to begin the impossible, expensive task of restoration, I sat down on the edge of the cold marble island in the kitchen. I looked out at the New York City skyline, the lights of the city twinkling like 1,000 distant cold promises. For the first time in my life, I realized that you can fake a lifestyle, you can fake success, and you can even fake a home for a few hours on a camera. But you can never ever fake the peace that comes from finally setting a boundary and refusing to let anyone cross it, no matter whose blood runs through their veins. The silence that followed the chaos was the most expensive thing in the room, and yet it was the only thing I truly owned. This experience taught me that we are often told family is the ultimate safety net, a sacred bond that justifies any sacrifice and forgives any sin. But as I have matured, I've come to realize that some people do not see a safety net as a place to rest. They see it as a trampoline to jump on until the strings snap. There is a specific quiet poison in the hearts of those who believe that their choices in life, like choosing to have children or choosing to struggle, grant them a moral lien over your hard-earned success. My sister did not just want my space. She wanted the feeling of having earned it without actually doing any of the work. She mistook my discipline for luck and my boundaries for cruelty. We live in a society that often romanticizes the martyrdom of the overwhelmed, telling them that the world owes them a debt simply for existing in a state of chaos. But true love, the kind that lasts through the decades, does not demand your destruction to facilitate its comfort. I spent years feeling guilty for my own ambition, for the fact that I preferred the silence of a clean room to the noise of a crowded one. I let my mother convince me that being the bigger person meant letting myself be stepped on until I was flat. But the bigger person is not the one who takes the most abuse. It is the one who has the courage to say that even family love has a price of admission, called respect. When Sarah was led away, I did not see a villain being defeated. I saw a woman who had been failed by a lifetime of enablers who never told her that the word no is a complete sentence. It is a painful thing to realize that the people who raised you can also be the ones who hold you back. However, there is a profound peace in finally choosing yourself. Life is too short to spend it as a background character in someone else's drama. Sometimes the most human thing you can do is let people face the consequences of their own actions, not out of malice, but out of a deep respect for the truth. Because in the end, you cannot save people from themselves, but you can certainly stop them from taking you down with them. Boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are the gates that protect the person you worked so hard to become. Your life is your own masterpiece, and you are the only one who gets to decide who is allowed to walk through the galleries of your soul. Do not let anyone, especially those who share your DNA, convince you that your success is a communal resource for them to deplete. Stand tall in your truth, hold your ground, and remember that your peace is worth more than any legacy built on a foundation of guilt. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of a boundary you need to set in your own life, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and hit that like button to support our work. It helps us continue to bring these stories of justice and resilience to light. I want to hear from you in the comments below. Have you ever had to choose between your family and your sanity? How did you find the strength to walk away? I read every single story you share, and your courage inspires me. Be kind to yourselves, protect your peace, and I will see you in the next video.